The blood trail led straight into his barn, and Kendrick knew before he even lit the lantern that whatever he found inside would change everything about his carefully ordered life in the Dakota Territory. It was late September in 1876, and the night air carried the first whisper of autumn cold across his ranch outside Yankton. Grant had been checking on his horses when he noticed the barn door hanging open, swaying slightly in the breeze. He always closed it at night. Always. The smear of darkness on the wooden frame caught his attention next, and when he touched it, his fingers came away sticky with blood. His heart hammered as he stepped inside, rifle ready but pointed down. The horses were restless in their stalls, stamping and snorting. Whatever had come in here had spooked them badly. Grant raised the lantern higher, sweeping it across the hay bales and equipment, the shadows dancing wildly in the flickering light. Then he saw her. She was crumpled in the far corner behind a stack of feed sacks, her dark hair matted with blood and dirt, her buckskin dress torn and stained crimson. An Apache woman, young from what he could tell, barely breathing. A bullet wound in her shoulder still seeped blood, and another graze along her ribs had left her dress soaked through. Her face was pale beneath her brown skin, her lips dry and cracked. Grant stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. He was a white rancher living alone on Dakota Territory land that had seen its share of conflict between settlers and the native tribes. Finding an Apache woman bleeding in his barn was dangerous for both of them. If anyone in town found out he was helping her, they would call him a traitor. If her people found out she was here, they might think he had hurt her. But none of that mattered as much as the fact that she was dying. He set down the rifle and knelt beside her, pressing his fingers to her neck. Her pulse was weak and thready, but it was there. She stirred slightly at his touch, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. They were dark and filled with pain and fear. She tried to pull away from him, a small sound of distress escaping her throat. "Easy," Grant said softly, holding up his hands. "I am not going to hurt you, I want to help." She did not understand his words, but something in his tone must have reached her because she stopped struggling and her eyes closed again. Grant knew he had to move quickly. He ran back to the house and grabbed his medical supplies, a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of whiskey. His hands shook as he gathered everything. He had patched up plenty of animals and even a few ranch hands over the years, but this felt different, more urgent, more personal somehow. When he returned to the barn, she had not moved. He set the lantern close and began cleaning the wounds as gently as he could. The bullet was still lodged in her shoulder, and he knew he would have to remove it. She came to consciousness when he poured whiskey over the wound, her back arching as she cried out. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "I have to get the bullet out," Grant said, meeting her eyes. "This is going to hurt, but if I do not do it, you will die." She stared at him for a long moment, and though she could not understand his words, she seemed to understand his meaning. Her grip on his wrist loosened, and she gave the smallest nod before closing her eyes again. Grant worked as quickly as he could, using a knife he had heated in the lantern flame to extract the bullet from her shoulder. She bit down on a leather strap he had given her and made no sound beyond harsh breathing through her nose. When the bullet finally came free, he cleaned and packed the wound, then stitched it closed with steady hands despite the way his stomach churned. The graze along her ribs was easier to manage, just cleaning and bandaging. By the time he finished, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. The woman had passed out again, which Grant figured was probably for the best. He could not leave her in the barn where anyone might find her. After a moment of deliberation, he carefully lifted her into his arms. She weighed less than he expected, her body slight and fragile feeling despite the warrior strength he had felt in her grip earlier. He carried her into the house and laid her on his own bed, the only one he had. She looked impossibly small against the quilts his mother had made years ago. Grant pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down heavily, suddenly exhausted. What was he doing? This was madness, but when he looked at her face, peaceful now in unconsciousness, he knew he could not have made any other choice. The first day passed in a blur. Grant checked on his cattle and horses, did the necessary morning chores, but his mind was always back in the house. He changed her bandages twice, dribbled water between her lips, and watched her chest rise and fall with each breath. She did not wake, and he began to worry that she might never regain consciousness. That evening, as he sat beside the bed reading from a worn Bible more out of habit than faith, her eyes opened. She looked around the unfamiliar room with obvious confusion before her gaze settled on him. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You are safe here," Grant said quietly. "No one knows you are here." She watched him warily, her hand moving slowly to touch the bandage on her shoulder. When she felt the careful stitching beneath the cloth, something in her expression shifted. Not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of understanding that he meant what he said about helping her. "I am Grant," he said, touching his chest. "Grant Kendrick." She studied him for a long moment, then whispered something in Apache that he did not understand. Her voice was hoarse from thirst and pain. "Here," he said, reaching for the cup of water on the bedside table. He helped her sit up enough to drink, supporting her shoulders carefully to avoid jarring her wounds. She drank greedily and he had to slow her down. Easy, not too fast. When she had finished, she looked at him again and touched her own chest. "Reva," she said. "Reva Pacheco." Grant felt something warm bloom in his chest at hearing her name. "Reva," he repeated, and she nodded. That was all the communication they managed that first day. She fell back asleep soon after, and Grant returned to his chair. He dozed there through the night, waking every hour or so to check on her. The second day brought more awareness. Reva woke several times, and each time she seemed stronger. Grant brought her broth that he had spent the morning making, and she managed to eat a little. He changed her bandages again, pleased to see that the wounds were not showing signs of infection. She watched everything he did with those dark, intelligent eyes, and he found himself talking to her, even though he knew she understood very little. "This ranch has been in my family for 8 years now," he said as he worked. "My father started it, brought my mother and me out here when I was 15. They both died 3 winters ago. Fever took them within a week of each other, so now it is just me and about 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses." Reva listened to the sound of his voice, and though she did not understand the words, she seemed calmer when he talked. Grant found himself telling her things he had not spoken aloud in years, about how lonely the ranch could be, about how the townspeople in Yankton kept their distance because they thought he was odd for wanting to live so far from others, about how he sometimes went weeks without hearing another human voice. "I do not know what happened to you," he said softly as he tied off a fresh bandage. "But I am glad you found your way here. I am glad I can help." On the third day, everything changed. Reva was sitting up in bed, still weak but clearly recovering. Grant had brought her breakfast and was attempting to communicate through gestures that he needed to go out to check on the cattle. She seemed to understand, nodding when he pointed outside and then back at the house to indicate he would return. He had been gone perhaps 2 hours when he saw them. 6 Apache warriors on horseback, sitting in a line on the ridge that overlooked his property. They were too far away for him to make out details, but close enough that their message was clear. They knew she was here. Grant's blood ran cold. He rode back to the house at a gallop, his mind racing through scenarios. By the time he reached the barn, the warriors had moved closer. They sat on their horses at the edge of his property line, their faces painted, rifles held across their laps. Waiting, Grant ran into the house. Reva was standing by the window, leaning heavily against the frame as she looked out. When she heard him enter, she turned, and the look on her face told him she knew exactly who was out there. "Your family?" Grant asked, gesturing toward the window. Reva nodded slowly. She touched her chest, then pointed outside and held up 3 fingers. Then she made a gesture that Grant interpreted as brothers, 3 brothers. They had come looking for their sister. "They think I hurt you," Grant said, more to himself than to her. "They think I am holding you here." Reva's face was troubled. She said something in Apache, her tone urgent, and pointed at him and then at herself, making gestures that he struggled to interpret. Finally, she took his hand and placed it over her bandaged shoulder, then touched his chest and nodded. She was trying to tell him that she knew he had helped her. "I need to go out there," Grant said. "I need to try to explain." Reva's eyes widened and she shook her head vehemently, grabbing his arm. She said something sharp in Apache, clearly telling him it was too dangerous. "If I do not go out there, they will come in here," Grant said gently, covering her hand with his. "And then we will both be in danger." He had no weapons on him except a knife at his belt. Taking a rifle would be suicide. If he walked out there armed, they would shoot him before he took 3 steps. His only chance was to show he meant no harm. The walk from his house to where the warriors sat felt like the longest of his life. He kept his hands visible and his pace steady, though every instinct screamed at him to run. As he got closer, he could see them more clearly. 3 men who looked to be in their 20s and early 30s, with the same strong features as Reva. Their faces were hard, their eyes full of barely controlled rage. The oldest looking of the 3, a man with a scar across his cheek and shoulders that spoke of warrior strength, moved his horse forward. He spoke in Apache, his voice sharp and demanding. Grant stopped about 20 feet away and held up his hands. "I do not speak your language," he said clearly, "but I have not hurt your sister. I found her bleeding in my barn 3 nights ago. I have been caring for her wounds." The warrior with the scar said something else, louder this time. Another of the brothers, younger with fierce eyes and long hair tied back, urged his horse forward as well. His hand tightened on his rifle. "She was shot," Grant continued, keeping his voice calm despite the fear coursing through him. "Twice. I removed the bullet from her shoulder and stitched the wounds. She is alive because I helped her." The 3rd brother, quieter than the others but no less dangerous looking, said something to the eldest. They had a quick exchange in Apache, too fast for Grant to even attempt to understand. Then a voice called out from behind him. "Stop!" Grant turned to see Reva stumbling from the house, one hand pressed to her wounded shoulder, her face pale but determined. She was moving too fast for her condition, and Grant moved instinctively to help her, but she waved him off and continued forward until she stood between him and her brothers. The change in the warriors was immediate. The eldest brother, the one with the scar, dismounted and rushed toward her, speaking rapidly in Apache. His face had transformed from rage to desperate relief. The other 2 brothers followed, surrounding their sister with obvious concern. Reva spoke to them, her words coming fast despite her obvious weakness. She kept gesturing to Grant and to her bandaged wounds. At one point, she pulled aside the neck of her dress to show them the careful stitching on her shoulder. The eldest brother examined it, then looked at Grant with different eyes. Still wary, but no longer murderous, the conversation went on for several minutes. Reva swayed on her feet, and Grant could not stop himself from stepping forward to steady her. The youngest brother's hand went to his rifle, but Reva said something sharp and he backed down. She allowed Grant to support her weight, which seemed to mean something to her brothers. Finally, Reva turned to Grant. She spoke slowly, using the few English words she seemed to know and many gestures. It took time, but he began to understand. Her brothers were named Takoda, Nashoba, and Chaitin. She was trying to tell them how Grant had saved her life. Takoda, the eldest with the scar, studied Grant for a long moment. Then he said something in broken English. "You saved sister." Grant nodded. "Yes, I found her bleeding. I could not let her die." Takoda spoke more in Apache, and Reva translated as best she could with gestures and her limited English. Gradually, the story emerged. Reva had been out hunting with a group from her village when they were attacked by white buffalo hunters. She had been shot trying to get away and had ridden for hours before her horse gave out. She had been delirious by the time she stumbled into Grant's barn. "We track for 3 days," Takoda said in his halting English. "Think white man kill her, take her." "I would never hurt her," Grant said, looking at Reva. "I only wanted to help." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition that went deeper than words. Reva's dark eyes met his, and Grant felt that warm bloom in his chest again, stronger this time. The brothers conferred among themselves in Apache. Grant could tell they were arguing about something, their voices rising and falling. Finally, Takoda turned back to them. "She stay here?" he asked, gesturing between Grant and Reva. "She too weak to ride?" Grant looked at Reva, who was clearly exhausted from the confrontation. "She can stay as long as she needs to heal." "You keep safe," Takoda said. It was not quite a question, more of a command. "I promise," Grant replied. "I will protect her with my life." Takoda studied him again, then nodded slowly. The brothers said goodbye to their sister, each embracing her carefully. There was more rapid conversation, and Grant saw Reva nod several times. Then the brothers mounted their horses. But instead of leaving, they rode a short distance away and began setting up a camp within sight of the house. "They are staying?" Grant asked. Reva nodded, leaning more heavily against him. She said something he did not understand, but the meaning was clear. Her brothers would watch over her until they were satisfied she was truly safe. Grant helped Reva back to the house, supporting most of her weight. She had pushed herself far too hard coming outside, and by the time they reached the bedroom, she was trembling with exhaustion. He settled her back into bed and pulled the quilts up over her. "That was very brave," he said softly, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "And very foolish. You should not have gotten out of bed." Reva caught his hand before he could pull away. She held it against her cheek for a moment, her eyes closing. When she opened them again, they were filled with something that made Grant's breath catch. "Thank you," she whispered in English, the words careful and deliberate. Grant smiled. "You are welcome." Over the next few days, a strange routine developed. Reva's brothers maintained their camp within sight of the house, and Grant went about his ranch work while checking on Reva regularly. Her brothers watched everything he did with hawk-like attention, but they did not interfere. Each evening, one of them would come to the house to check on their sister. It was usually Takoda, who seemed to speak the most English. Reva's strength returned steadily. By the end of the first week, she was able to walk around the house on her own. She began helping with small tasks, despite Grant's protests. Insisting through gestures and the growing number of English words, she was learning that she needed to contribute. Grant found himself teaching her English whenever they were together, pointing to objects and saying their names, acting out verbs. Reva was a quick learner, absorbing new words eagerly. In return, she taught him some Apache, though he struggled more than she did with the unfamiliar sounds. "Water," Grant said, holding up a cup. "Water," Reva repeated perfectly. "In Apache is two." "Two," Grant attempted, and Reva laughed at his pronunciation. Her laugh was like music, bright and unexpected, and it made something in Grant's chest tighten with feeling. "You try," she said, handing him a spoon. "What this?" "Spoon," he replied, and she nodded, adding it to her growing vocabulary. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window and turning Reva's hair into a cascade of dark silk. Grant found himself staring at her, at the way her eyes lit up when she mastered a new word, at the graceful movement of her hands as she gestured. She caught him looking and tilted her head, a question in her eyes. "I was just thinking," Grant said slowly, "that I am glad you are here. Even though the circumstances were terrible, I am glad it brought you to my door." Reva's expression softened. "I am glad too," she said. "You good man, Grant Kendrick." She reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers small and warm in his. Grant turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers, marveling at how right it felt. How natural. That night, Takoda came to check on his sister as usual. He found them sitting together by the fireplace, Reva in the rocking chair and Grant seated on the floor nearby, continuing their language lessons. Takoda watched them for a moment before speaking to his sister in Apache. Reva responded, her voice quiet but firm. Whatever she said made Takoda's eyebrows rise. He looked at Grant with new interest, then back at his sister. They had a longer conversation, and Grant wished desperately that he could understand what they were saying. Finally, Takoda turned to him. "My sister say you are good man," he said. "She say you have kind heart. She want to stay longer, help with ranch work, grow more strong." Grant looked at Reva, his heart pounding. "She can stay as long as she wants, forever if she wishes." Takoda translated this for Reva, and her face lit up with a smile that took Grant's breath away. She said something in Apache and Takoda actually laughed. "She say yes," Takoda said. "She say she want to learn more English, learn about ranch, learn about you." After Takoda left, Grant and Reva sat in comfortable silence for a while. The fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, Reva spoke. "Tell me about your family," she said carefully. "Your mother and father, you say they gone." Grant felt the familiar ache in his chest that always came when he thought about his parents. "My father was a hard man but fair. He worked from dawn to dusk building this ranch. He wanted to create something that would last, something to pass down to his children and grandchildren. My mother was gentle and kind. She made this house a home. She taught me to read and to appreciate beautiful things. She made those quilts you have been sleeping under." "She make beautiful things," Reva said, running her hand over the quilt. "She have good spirit." "She did," Grant agreed. "I miss them both every day. Sometimes I catch myself starting to tell them something before I remember they are gone." Reva nodded solemnly. "I know this feeling. I lose mother when I was small girl. Father die last winter in fight with soldiers. I have only brothers now, and uncle and cousins in village." "I am sorry," Grant said softly. "Loss is hard to carry." "Yes," Reva agreed. "But maybe we carry together, make easier." Grant looked at her, at the hope and vulnerability in her eyes, and felt something shift inside him. He moved to kneel beside her chair, taking both her hands in his. "I would like that very much," he said. Reva smiled and reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with wonder. "You have good face," she said. "Strong but kind. I see in eyes when I first wake. Even with pain and fear, I see you have kind eyes." Grant turned his face to press a kiss to her palm, and Reva's breath caught. They stayed like that for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility and promise. The weeks that followed were the happiest Grant could remember. Reva's wounds healed cleanly, and soon she was able to help more around the ranch. Her brothers gradually moved their camp farther away as they became confident that Grant truly meant their sister no harm. Eventually, they returned to their village but visited every few days to check on her. Grant taught Reva everything about running the ranch. She learned to milk the cow, to collect eggs from the chickens, to repair fences and tend the vegetable garden. She was a natural with the horses, moving among them with confident ease. Grant loved watching her work, the way she approached every task with focus and determination. In return, Reva taught him about Apache ways. She showed him how to track animals by the smallest signs, how to read the weather in the sky and the behavior of birds. She taught him about desert plants that could be used for medicine or food. And slowly, she taught him her language, correcting his pronunciation with patience and encouraging smiles. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and spending the evenings by the fire, talking and learning about each other. Grant found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, and Reva did the same. The walls between them dissolved bit by bit, until it felt like they had known each other forever. One evening in late October, they were outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Reva stood close enough that their shoulders touched and Grant could smell the sage soap she had started using. "In my village," Reva said quietly, "when man and woman have feelings, man bring gifts to woman's family. Show he can provide. Show he is worthy." Grant's heart began to race. And what if the man is not Apache? What if he is white? Reva turned to face him fully. Some in village would say no, say white men bring only death and sadness. But my brothers see you, they see how you treat me, with respect and kindness. Takoda tell me yesterday that you are good man. That if my heart choose you, he will not stand against it. And has your heart chosen? Grant asked, hardly daring to breathe. Reva reached up to cup his face in both hands. My heart choose the moment I wake and see you watching over me. I just not know English words to say it. Grant pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I love you, Reva. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you in my barn. You have brought light and warmth back into my life. This house has not felt like a home since my parents died, but now with you here, it feels complete. I love you, Reva said, the English words careful but certain. You save my life. You give me new life, better life. I want to stay with you always. Grant kissed her then, soft and gentle, pouring all his feelings into that first kiss. Reva responded with equal tenderness, her arms wrapping around his neck as she pressed closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Marry me, Grant said. I know it will not be easy. I know people will talk and some will hate us for it, but I do not care. I want you as my wife. I want to build a life with you. Reva's eyes were bright with tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I marry you, Grant Kendrick. We face everything together. They told Reva's brothers the next time they visited. Takoda's reaction was complicated, his face showing concern and acceptance in equal measure. This will be hard path, he said seriously. White people in town they not like, maybe Apache people not like too, you both must be strong. We know, Grant said, holding Reva's hand tightly, but we love each other. That is what matters most. Takoda looked at his sister. You sure this is what you want? You can come home to village, live with your people. Reva shook her head. My home is here now with Grant, but I want to keep connection to village, to family, to Apache ways. Of course, Grant said quickly. Your brothers and family are always welcome here. Always. Neshoba and Chayton, the younger brothers, seemed less convinced than Takoda, but they followed their eldest brother's lead. After much discussion in Apache, Takoda turned back to them. We will tell uncle and cousins. There will be ceremony in village if you want. Apache way of marriage. Then you can do white way too if you need for law. And so it was arranged. 2 weeks later, on a crisp November day, Grant and Reva traveled to the Apache village with her brothers. Grant had been nervous about the reception he would receive, but Reva had been confident. "Takoda speak for you," she had told him. "He is respected warrior. His word carry weight." The village was unlike anything Grant had ever seen. Adobe and hide structures arranged in a careful pattern, smoke rising from cooking fires, children running and playing, women working on crafts and food preparation. When they arrived, many people stopped to stare at the white man who had come with the chief's nephews. An older man approached, his weathered face stern. This was Maska, Reva's uncle and one of the village leaders. Takoda spoke to him at length in Apache, gesturing to Grant and Reva. Maska's expression remained unreadable throughout. Finally, Maska addressed Grant directly in surprisingly good English. "Takoda say you save his sister life, say you treat her with honor, this is true?" "Yes, sir," Grant replied respectfully. "I love your niece. I want to marry her and build a good life with her." Maska studied him for a long moment. "Many white men bring pain to Apache people. They lie, they steal, they kill. Why should we trust you?" "I cannot speak for other white men," Grant said honestly. "I can only tell you about myself. I believe all people deserve respect and dignity. I know there have been terrible injustices committed against your people, and I do not support those actions. I love Reva for who she is, and I respect her heritage and her family. I will spend my life proving that I am worthy of her." Maska translated this for the people who had gathered around them. There was much discussion, voices rising and falling. Grant felt Reva squeeze his hand, and he squeezed back reassuringly. Eventually, Maska raised his hand for silence. He said something in Apache that made Reva's face light up with joy. "He say yes," she whispered to Grant. "He say we can have ceremony." The Apache wedding ceremony was beautiful and meaningful in ways Grant had not anticipated. It took place at sunset, with the whole village gathered in a circle. Maska presided, speaking words in Apache that Takoda translated quietly for Grant. The ceremony involved symbolic gifts, the sharing of food, and the joining of hands over a sacred fire. Reva wore a traditional dress of soft doeskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and she had never looked more beautiful. When it came time for Grant to speak, he did so in both English and the Apache he had learned, wanting to honor both parts of who they were becoming together. "I promise to love you, protect you, and honor you all the days of my life," he said. "I promise to respect your people and your ways. I promise to be a good husband and partner. My heart is yours, now and always." Reva responded in kind, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to love you, stand beside you, and make our home a place of joy. I promise to teach our children both Apache and white ways, so they know both parts of themselves. My heart is yours, now and forever." They sealed their vows with a kiss as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the village erupted in celebration. There was feasting and dancing long into the night. Grant was welcomed with a warmth he had not expected, many of the villagers coming to speak with him and offer their congratulations. Takoda pulled him aside at one point, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "You are brother now," he said. "You ever need help, you call, we come." "Thank you," Grant said, genuinely moved. "The same is true for you and your family. My home is your home." They stayed in the village for 3 days, and Grant learned more about Apache culture and Reva's life before she came to his ranch. He met cousins and aunts and uncles, heard stories of Reva's childhood, saw the places that had shaped her. It helped him understand her better, and it strengthened his resolve to honor both parts of their joined life. When they returned to the ranch, it felt different somehow. More complete. This was truly their home now, a place where both of them belonged. Winter came early that year, bringing snow and cold winds that howled around the house. But inside, Grant and Reva were warm and happy. They spent the long evenings by the fire, Grant reading aloud while Reva worked on beadwork or mending. They cooked together, combining Apache and white recipes into meals that were uniquely theirs. They talked about their dreams and plans for the future. Going into town was harder than Grant had hoped. When he first brought Reva with him to Yankton, the reactions ranged from cold silence to open hostility. The shopkeeper refused to serve them until Grant made it clear he would take his business elsewhere. Women clutched their children and hurried to the other side of the street. Men stared with undisguised contempt. "Maybe I should not come to town," Reva said quietly as they rode home, their supplies loaded in the wagon. "No," Grant said firmly. "This is your home too. You have every right to be here. They will get used to it eventually." But some people never did. There were incidents over that first winter. Someone left a dead coyote on their doorstep with a threatening note. Their fence was cut one night, letting some cattle wander off. Grant found ugly words painted on the side of his barn. Each time Reva wanted to leave, to save Grant from the hatred directed at them. And each time, Grant refused. "I am not letting ignorant, hateful people drive us apart," he said. "This is our land, our home. We have every right to be here and to be happy together." Takoda and the other brothers came when they heard about the harassment. They offered to camp on Grant's land again to provide protection. Grant was grateful but concerned. "That might make things worse," he said. "If people see Apache warriors here, they might think we are a threat." "You are family," Takoda said simply. "We protect family." In the end, they compromised. Reva's brothers did not camp on the property, but they visited more frequently, and word spread that the Apache were watching. The harassment lessened, though the cold reception in town remained. Spring brought new life to the ranch and new hope for Grant and Reva. The cattle had survived the winter well, and several cows were expecting calves. The garden began to sprout, and Reva spent hours tending it, adding traditional Apache plants alongside the vegetables Grant had always grown. And in April, Reva told Grant she was expecting a child. Grant's reaction was pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, making her laugh and protest that he would make her dizzy. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, his hands cradling her face. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a family." "You happy?" Reva asked, though she could clearly see that he was. "Happy does not begin to describe it," Grant replied. "You have given me everything. Love, purpose, a reason to build a future. And now a child. I could not ask for more." Reva rested her hand on her still flat stomach. "I hope baby look like you," she said. "Have your kind eyes." "I hope the baby looks like you," Grant countered, "and has your strength and intelligence." They spent the evening making plans, talking about names and how they would raise their child. They agreed that their son or daughter would learn both English and Apache, would know both cultures and be proud of both heritages. When they told Reva's brothers, the three warriors were overjoyed. Takoda clapped Grant on the back hard enough to make him stagger. "You will be good father," he said. "I see how you care for my sister. You will care for baby same way." Reva's pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Her belly swelled as the season warmed, and Grant found himself constantly worried about her overworking. Reva bore his fussing with patient amusement. "Apache women work until baby comes," she reminded him whenever he tried to take a task away from her. "I am strong. Baby is strong. We will be fine." Still, Grant could not help hovering. He did the heavier chores without being asked, brought her water constantly, and made sure she rested in the afternoons. Reva teased him about it but seemed secretly pleased by his attentiveness. In August, they made another trip to Yankton for supplies they would need for the baby's arrival. The reception was as cold as ever, though Grant noticed that some of the younger people seemed more curious than hostile. One woman, a pastor's wife named Mrs. Catherine Fellows, actually approached them. "I wanted to say congratulations on your coming child," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "I know many in this town have been unkind to you both, and I am ashamed of that. God teaches us to love one another, not to judge and condemn. I hope you will feel welcome in our community eventually." Reva was clearly surprised but recovered quickly. "Thank you," she said. "That is kind of you to say. If you need anything as your time approaches, please do not hesitate to ask," Mrs. Fellows continued. "I have helped deliver many babies and would be happy to assist." Grant felt a rush of gratitude for this unexpected kindness. "Thank you, madam. We appreciate that more than you know." As they drove home, Reva was quiet and thoughtful. Finally, she spoke. "Maybe not all white people are bad. Just like not all Apache are good. People are people, some kind, some cruel." "That is very wise," Grant said, taking her hand. "And it gives me hope that our child will grow up in a better world than the one we have known." In late September, as the year came full circle to when Grant had first found Reva in his barn, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Fellows, who proved as good as her word, and by a medicine woman from Reva's village. The combination of white and Apache traditions seemed fitting for the child who would bridge both worlds. Grant was terrified through the whole process, pacing outside the bedroom as Reva labored within. When he finally heard his son's first cry, he burst into tears of relief and joy. Mrs. Fellows emerged to tell him he could come in, her face tired but smiling. Reva was propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in one of his mother's quilts. When Grant approached, she pulled back the fabric to reveal the tiny face of their son. The baby had Reva's dark hair and Grant's lighter skin, a perfect blend of both parents. His eyes, when they opened, were dark like his mother's but with flecks of green from Grant's side. He was beautiful and perfect, and Grant felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "Our son," Reva said softly. "What should we call him?" They had discussed names for months, wanting something that honored both cultures. Finally, they had agreed on a name that worked in both English and Apache. "Samuel," Grant said. "Samuel Talon Kendrick." "Samuel for my grandfather and Talon for your father." Reva smiled. "Yes, Samuel Talon is perfect." Grant carefully took his son into his arms, marveling at how small and fragile he seemed. "Hello, Samuel," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise to love you and protect you always. I promise to teach you to be a good man, to respect all people, to be strong but kind. I promise to tell you about both sides of your family so you can be proud of where you come from." Samuel yawned and made a small noise, his tiny hand curling around Grant's finger with surprising strength. Grant looked at Reva, tears running down his face. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for giving me this gift, for giving me everything." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant activity. Samuel was a hungry baby and he kept them both busy, but Grant had never been happier. He loved watching Reva with their son, the gentle way she sang to him in Apache, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes when she held him. Reva's family came to meet Samuel shortly after he was born. Takoda held his nephew with surprising tenderness for such a fierce warrior, speaking to him in Apache and welcoming him to the family. Maska came as well, the old chief studying the baby carefully before pronouncing him strong and healthy. "He will walk in two worlds," Maska said. This will be hard for him, but if you teach him well, he can be bridge between peoples. Bring understanding where there is hate. We will do our best, Grant promised. As Samuel grew, Grant and Reva settled into their roles as parents. They taught him both languages from the start, Reva speaking to him in Apache and Grant in English. They exposed him to both cultures, celebrating both white holidays and Apache traditions. When Samuel took his first steps, it was toward Takoda, who was visiting that day, and everyone cheered. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Reva's knowledge of the land and Grant's understanding of cattle ranching combined to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. They expanded the herd, added more horses, and began selling breeding stock to other ranchers. The profits allowed them to improve the house and the outbuildings. Town remained a complicated place for them, but gradually, very gradually, attitudes began to shift. Mrs. Fellows became a true friend, visiting regularly and defending Grant and Reva whenever others spoke against them. Other people began to follow her lead, tired of holding on to hatred. The shopkeeper who had initially refused to serve them eventually apologized, saying his conscience had been bothering him. "I let fear and ignorance guide me," he said, "but I have watched you both over these years. You are good people, hard workers, honest in your dealings. I was wrong to treat you poorly." Grant appreciated the apology, though Reva remained more skeptical of the town's acceptance. "Words are easy," she said. "Actions show truth." But slowly, actions followed. When a fire broke out at a neighboring ranch, Grant and Reva were among those who came to help, and the assistance was accepted with genuine gratitude. When Samuel was 2 years old, a few families actually accepted their invitation to a harvest celebration at their ranch. It was a small step, but it felt significant. Not everyone changed their minds. There were still those who sneered and muttered when Grant and Reva came to town, still those who thought their marriage was an abomination. But enough attitudes shifted that they could move through the world with less fear and more hope. When Samuel was 3, Reva told Grant she was expecting again. This time, Grant was more confident, though no less attentive to Reva's needs. Their daughter was born in the spring, a healthy baby with lungs that could make themselves heard across the ranch. They named her Rose Ayana Kendrick, Rose for Grant's mother and Ayana meaning eternal blossom in Apache. Samuel was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to help care for her. He would bring her toys, sing the Apache lullabies his mother had taught him, and tell her stories in his mixed language of English and Apache words. Rose clearly adored her big brother, her eyes following him whenever he was in the room. Grant would sometimes stand in the doorway of the children's room, watching Reva rock Rose while Samuel played nearby, and feel overwhelmed by how blessed he was. This life he had built with Reva, this family they had created together, was more than he had ever dreamed possible. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growing of their children. Samuel grew into a bright, curious boy who asked endless questions about everything. He loved learning about both his Apache and white heritage, and he seemed to instinctively understand that he could honor both. Rose was more reserved but equally intelligent, with a particular gift for working with the horses. When Samuel was 8 and Rose was 5, a group of Apache raiders attacked a ranch about 20 miles from Grant's property. The incident stirred up old fears and hatreds in Yankton, and for a while, Grant and Reva faced renewed hostility. People who had started to accept them withdrew again, and there were whispers that Reva might be connected to the raiders. Grant was furious at the accusations. "My wife has lived peacefully on this ranch for years," he told anyone who would listen. "She has broken no laws, hurt no one, Judge her by her actions, not by the actions of others who happen to share her heritage. Takota came to the ranch, concerned about the new tensions. Some hotheads in village, he admitted. Young warriors angry about land being taken, about treaties broken. They act without wisdom, but many of us want peace. I know that, Grant said, just as some white people want violence while others want peace. We cannot let the angry few destroy what we have built. It was Samuel who ultimately helped ease the tensions. When some boys in town cornered him and started calling him names, he did not fight back. Instead, he invited them to come see the ranch, to meet his mother and uncles, to understand that Apache people were not monsters to be feared. Surprisingly, a few of the boys actually came. Reva fed them and spoke with them, answering their questions honestly. Takota happened to be visiting that day, and he told them stories of Apache history and culture. The boys left with a different understanding than they had arrived with, and they told others what they had learned. It was not a perfect solution, and it did not change everyone's minds. But it was another step forward, another small bridge built between the two communities. As Samuel and Rose grew older, they both attended the school in Yankton. It was not always easy for them, being children of a mixed marriage, but they faced the challenges with courage and grace. Samuel, in particular, seemed to have inherited both his mother's determination and his father's diplomacy. He made friends with children from both white and Apache families, refusing to be limited by the boundaries others tried to impose. Rose was quieter but no less brave. She excelled at her studies and became known for her skill with horses. By the time she was 12, people were bringing difficult horses to the ranch specifically for her to train. She had a gift for understanding animals, a patience and intuition that worked miracles. Grant and Reva watched their children grow with pride and love. They continued to build their ranch, their family, and their place in the community. Grant's hair began to show gray at the temples, and Reva developed fine lines around her eyes, but their love only deepened with time. They never forgot how they had come together, how close Reva had come to dying in that barn before Grant found her. Every year on the anniversary of that night, they took a quiet moment to reflect on the journey they had traveled together. "You ever regret it?" Grant asked one year as they stood watching the sunset together. "Staying here with me, you could have gone back to your village, lived among your own people." Reva looked at him with surprise. "You are my people," she said simply. "You and Samuel and Rose, Takota and my brothers, Mrs. Fellows and the others who have become friends. Family is not only about blood, is about love and choice. I choose you every day, Grant Kendrick. I will choose you every day for rest of my life." Grant pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I choose you too, always." When Samuel was 16 and Rose was 13, Takota came to them with news. "My wife's father, the chief, is very sick," he said. "He asks to see Reva and her family before he passes." They made the journey to the Apache village, now grown and changed but still recognizable. The old chief, Maska's brother, lay on furs in his home, his breathing labored but his mind still sharp. He looked at Samuel and Rose with pleased eyes. "These are your children," he said to Reva in Apache, which Takota translated for Grant. "They carry our blood forward. They will help heal the wounds between our peoples. I see it in them." The chief died 2 days later, and Grant's family stayed for the funeral ceremonies. It was during this time that Samuel, watching the Apache warriors and listening to the stories of his ancestors, began to truly understand the weight of his heritage, both the beauty of his mother's culture and the pain of what had been lost to it. "I want to help," he told his parents that night. "I want to be someone who builds bridges, who helps people understand each other, like you and Mother have done." Grant felt pride swell in his chest. "Then that is what you will do. We will support you in whatever path you choose." Rose, listening quietly, spoke up. "I want that too, to help. Maybe I can teach people that we are all the same in the ways that matter." Reva had tears in her eyes as she embraced both her children. "You make me so proud," she said. "Both of you. You take the best from both worlds and make it something new and good." The years continued their steady march. Samuel grew into a young man who worked as a translator and negotiator between white communities and Apache villages, using his unique position to foster understanding and prevent conflicts. He had a gift for diplomacy that served him well, and he helped settle several disputes that might otherwise have led to violence. Rose ran the horse training program on the ranch, gaining a reputation that brought customers from across the territory. She eventually married a young man from town, a carpenter's son who had been one of the boys she and Samuel had befriended years ago. Their wedding was attended by both white and Apache guests, a celebration that would have been unthinkable 20 years earlier. Grant and Reva continued to work the ranch together, though they began to slow down as age crept up on them. They took more time to enjoy the simple pleasures of life together. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks around the property, quiet hours spent reading side by side. When Samuel was 24, he married an Apache woman from his mother's village, a match that pleased everyone. The wedding ceremony combined elements from both cultures, much like his parents' wedding had, and it was a joyous occasion that brought together people from all parts of Samuel and his bride's lives. "We built something good," Reva said to Grant as they watched their son dance with his new wife. "Something that will continue after we are gone." "We did," Grant agreed, his arm around his wife's waist. "And I am grateful for every moment of it. Grateful that you stumbled into my barn that night. Grateful that you trusted me enough to stay. Grateful for the life we have built together." Reva leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "I am grateful too. You gave me everything. Love, home, family, purpose. You saw past what I look like and who my people are. You saw me and you loved me anyway." "Not anyway," Grant corrected gently. "I loved you because of who you are. Every part of you. I always have and I always will." They stayed at the celebration until late, surrounded by their children, their extended family from both sides, and the community they had helped build. It was a far cry from the isolation and loneliness Grant had known before Reva came into his life. As the years passed, Grant and Reva became elders in their community, respected by both white and Apache neighbors. They became the living proof that love could transcend differences, that families could be built across cultural divides. That peace was possible when people chose understanding over fear. When Rose gave them their first grandchild, a boy with dark hair and green eyes, Grant held the baby and felt the circle complete. His mother's quilts, which had comforted Reva when she first came to the ranch, now wrapped his grandson. The house his father had built sheltered 3 generations. The land they had all worked so hard to maintain would continue into the future. "What should we call him?" Rose asked. Grant looked at Reva, seeing in her eyes all the years they had shared, all the challenges they had overcome, all the love that had sustained them. "That is for you and your husband to decide," Grant said. "But whatever you choose, make sure he knows the story of how his grandmother came to this ranch. Make sure he knows that love is stronger than hate, that courage means standing up for what is right even when it is hard, and that family is built through loyalty and love, not just blood." Rose nodded, understanding the importance of passing down their story. Samuel's wife gave birth to a daughter a few months later, and then Rose had a second child, another girl. Grant and Reva's house filled with the sound of grandchildren's laughter. their small hands leaving prints on windows, their toys scattered across the floors that Grant's father had laid down decades ago. Grant was in his late 50s now, his hair fully gray, his face weathered from years of outdoor work. Reva had aged as well, her dark hair showing silver threads, her graceful walk slowed slightly by time. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been when they first fell in love. The rancher who had chosen compassion over fear. The Apache woman who had trusted a stranger with her life. They continued to share the morning coffee ritual they had started years ago, sitting on the porch as the sun rose over their land. Grant would tell Reva what he had planned for the day, and she would share her thoughts and suggestions. After all these years, they had developed a way of working together that was seamless, each anticipating the other's needs and thoughts. "You remember when you first tried to teach me English?" Reva asked one morning, a smile playing on her lips. "I could barely say 3 words." "And now you speak better than half the people in town," Grant replied with a chuckle. "You have always been the smartest person I know." "You just saying that because you love me," Reva teased. "I am saying it because it is true." "And also because I love you," Grant corrected, taking her hand and kissing it. These quiet moments were Grant's favorite. The ranch was successful. Their children were thriving. Their grandchildren were growing up in a world that was slowly becoming more accepting. But none of it meant as much as these simple moments with the woman he loved. On a warm day in June, when Grant was 60 and Reva was 58, they decided to ride out to the ridge where her brothers had first appeared all those years ago. It was a journey they made occasionally, a way of remembering how far they had come. They sat on their horses looking out over the ranch, the cattle grazing peacefully, the house with smoke rising from the chimney where Rose was probably cooking dinner, the barn where their story had begun. "When I was dying in that barn," Reva said quietly, "I prayed to the spirits to let me live. I was not ready to die. I had too much life left to live, and they brought me to you." "I have always believed you were meant to find your way here," Grant said. "That everything happened the way it was supposed to, even the terrible parts, because it brought us together." "You think spirits guide our paths?" Reva asked, curious. She knew Grant had been raised Christian but had never been particularly devout. "I think something does," Grant replied. "Whether you call it God or spirits or fate or just chance, I am grateful for whatever force brought you into my life." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the wind rustling the grass around them, the sun warm on their faces. Grant thought about the night he had found Reva, how scared he had been, how certain he was that helping her was the right thing to do despite the danger. He had never regretted that decision, not for a single moment. "We should head back," Reva said eventually. "Rose will have dinner ready soon, and Samuel said he might bring the children by." Grant nodded, but before they turned their horses, he reached over and took Reva's hand. "I love you," he said. "Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for every single day we have had together." Reva's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too. More than all the stars in the sky, more than the earth beneath our feet. You are my heart, Grant Kendrick. You always will be." They rode back to the house together, side by side as they had been for over 30 years. The house came into view, lights glowing in the windows, and Grant could see small figures running around the yard. The grandchildren, playing some game that involved much shrieking and laughter. Rose came out of the house when she heard the horses approach, waving to her parents. Samuel's wagon was pulling up the drive, his wife and daughter visible in the seat beside him. It was going to be a full house for dinner, loud and chaotic and perfect. As Grant dismounted and helped Reva down from her horse, he took a moment to absorb the scene. His family gathered together. His home built with love and hard work. His land stretching out under the endless Dakota sky. And most importantly, the woman beside him who made all of it meaningful. "Happy?" Reva asked, seeing his expression. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Grant replied honestly. They walked toward the house together, toward the noise and warmth and love waiting inside. Behind them, the barn stood in the gathering twilight, the place where their story had begun with blood and fear and desperate hope. But those dark beginnings had led to this bright present, this family, this love that had overcome every obstacle placed in its path. That night, after dinner was finished and the dishes were washed and the grandchildren were tucked into beds, Grant and Reva sat by the fire in their bedroom. It was the same bed where Reva had recovered from her wounds, where both their children had been born, where they had shared 30 years of marriage. "Tell me a story," Reva said, settling against Grant's shoulder. It was an old ritual of theirs, taking turns telling each other stories from their lives or their cultures. "What kind of story do you want to hear?" Grant asked, his arm around her. "Tell me our story," Reva said. "Tell me how we fell in love." Grant smiled and began. "Once upon a time, there was a lonely rancher who thought he would spend his life alone. Then one night, he found a wounded woman in his barn, and she changed everything." He continued the story, telling it the way he might tell a fairy tale to their grandchildren. He talked about how brave Reva had been, facing death, and then facing life in a strange place with a stranger. He talked about how she had taught him to see the world differently, to be a better man. He talked about falling in love despite the language barrier, despite the cultural differences, despite everything that stood in their way. And they lived happily ever after. Reva asked when he finished, though she knew the answer. "They did," Grant confirmed. "They faced challenges and hardships, but they faced them together. They built a family and a home and a legacy that would continue for generations. And they loved each other every single day, from that first night in the barn until the end of their days." Reva tilted her face up for a kiss, and Grant obliged her. After all these years, kissing her still made his heart race, still filled him with the same wonder and joy it had that first time. "I am glad you found me," Reva whispered against his lips. "I am glad you let me help you," Grant replied. "I am glad you stayed." They stayed by the fire for a while longer, content in each other's presence. Outside, the Dakota night was vast and star-filled. The land stretched out around them, the same land where so much conflict had occurred between white settlers and native peoples. But here, in this house, two people had found a way to bridge those divides, to build something better together than either could have alone. As the years continued to pass, Grant and Reva remained active in both their families' lives and in the broader community. They became known as wise counselors, people who could see multiple perspectives and find common ground. When disputes arose between white ranchers and Apache villages, they were often called upon to mediate. Their unique perspective and genuine respect for both cultures made them trusted voices. Samuel followed in their footsteps, building his own reputation as a peacemaker and negotiator. His children grew up bilingual and bicultural, as comfortable in an Apache village as they were in Yankton. Rose's horse training business continued to thrive, and her children showed the same gift with animals that she possessed. When Grant was 65, the town of Yankton held a celebration in honor of him and Reva's 35th wedding anniversary. It was a testament to how much things had changed that the event was well attended by people from all walks of life. The mayor gave a speech about how Grant and Reva had helped shape the community into a more accepting and unified place. 35 years ago, the mayor said, Many of us would not have believed that a white rancher and an Apache woman could build a successful life together. But Grant and Reva Kendrick proved us wrong. They showed us that love transcends all boundaries, that families can take many forms, and that our differences make us stronger rather than weaker. They have been an example to all of us, and we are better for having them in our community. Grant and Reva stood together as people came to congratulate them and share their own stories of how the couple had impacted their lives. Mrs. Fellows, now elderly herself, embraced them both with tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope," she said. "Hope that people can change, that love can overcome hate. You taught me to be braver in standing up for what is right." It was a perfect evening, filled with food and music and dancing. Grant danced with Reva under the stars, his body not as strong as it once was, but his love as fierce as ever. Reva's hair was more silver than black now, but she was still beautiful in his eyes, still the woman who had stolen his heart all those years ago. "Did you ever imagine this?" Grant asked as they swayed to the music. "That night in the barn, did you imagine we would end up here?" "I did not imagine living through the night," Reva replied honestly. "Everything after that has been a gift. But yes, once I knew you, once I loved you, I imagined growing old with you, having children and grandchildren, building a life that mattered. We did all of that, Grant. We did it together." The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Grant and Reva made their way home, tired but happy. Their children and grandchildren came with them, filling the house with warmth and noise. Grant sat in his chair by the fire, watching his family interact, and felt profound contentment. This was what he had saved all those years ago when he had found Reva in his barn. Not just one life, but all of these lives. His children, who might never have been born. His grandchildren, who carried forward both Apache and white heritage with pride. The community that had learned from their example. It was a legacy far greater than he had ever dreamed of creating. As Grant moved into his 70s, his body began to slow down more noticeably. His hands, which had worked the land for over 50 years, became arthritic. His back ached from old injuries. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Reva never wavered. Reva took over more of the physical work on the ranch, though Samuel and Rose both helped extensively. The grandchildren, now teenagers and young adults themselves, pitched in as well. The ranch had truly become a family operation, sustained by the combined efforts of 3 generations. One winter evening, when Grant was 73 and Reva was 71, they sat together watching snow fall outside their window. The fire crackled in the hearth, and Grant held Reva's hand in his thumb tracing patterns on her weathered skin. "I have been thinking," Grant said quietly, "about what happens after." Reva looked at him sharply. "After what?" "After I am gone," Grant said. "I am not a young man anymore, Reva. I need to know that you will be all right, that you will be cared for." Reva's grip on his hand tightened. "Do not talk like that. You are not going anywhere." "Not today," Grant agreed. "But someday, we both know that, and when that day comes, I need to know you will be all right." "How can I be all right without you?" Reva asked, her voice breaking. "You are my heart, my life. Everything I am has been built with you." Grant pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "And you will carry that with you always. Our love does not end when one of us dies. It lives on in our children, in our grandchildren, in everything we built together. You will be all right because you are the strongest person I have ever known, and because our family will take care of you, just as we have taken care of each other all these years." Reva cried against his chest, and Grant held her, his own eyes wet with tears. He knew this conversation was necessary, but it broke his heart to have it. "I do not want to lose you," Reva whispered. "I know," Grant said. I do not want to leave you either. But when the time comes, I will go knowing that I had the most blessed life any man could ask for, because I had you. Because we had all of this together. They held each other for a long time, the snow falling softly outside, the fire burning low. Eventually, Reva spoke again. When I die, I want to be buried next to you, on our land where we can watch over the ranch together, where our spirits can stay with our family. I want that too, Grant said. Together always, even in death. But death did not come for Grant that winter, nor the next. He continued on, his body growing frailer but his spirit undimmed. He celebrated his 75th birthday surrounded by his family, delighted by the chaos of great-grandchildren running through the house. Yes, great-grandchildren. Samuel's daughter had married and started her own family, and Rose's oldest son had done the same. Grant was now the patriarch of a sprawling, diverse family that included people of various backgrounds and cultures. It was everything he had hoped for and more. On a spring morning shortly after his 76th birthday, Grant woke to find Reva already up and dressed, standing at the window looking out over their land. The morning light caught the silver in her hair and highlighted the lines on her face, each one a testament to years lived fully and well. "Come back to bed," Grant said. "It is too early to be up." Reva turned and smiled at him. "I was just thinking about that first morning when I woke up in this bed after you saved me. I was so scared, but you were sitting right there in that chair watching over me. And I knew even then that I was safe with you." Grant sat up, holding out his hand to her. "You have always been safe with me, and I have always been safe with you. We protected each other, cared for each other. That is what love is." Reva came to sit beside him on the bed, taking his outstretched hand. "I have no regrets, Grant, not a single one. Every choice I made, every challenge we faced led us here. To this moment, to this life. I would not change anything." "Neither would I," Grant said, kissing her softly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They spent that day together, working side by side on small tasks around the ranch. Grant was moving slower now, but he still insisted on contributing where he could. Reva stayed close, ready to help if he needed it, but respecting his independence and dignity. That evening, after a dinner with Samuel and his family, Grant felt unusually tired. He settled into his chair by the fire, and Reva sat on the arm of the chair, running her fingers through his gray hair. "Maybe we should go to bed early tonight," Reva suggested, noting his fatigue. "In a minute," Grant said. "I just want to sit here with you for a while, listen to the fire, feel you near me. This is my favorite time of day, you know, when it is just us, quiet and peaceful." "Mine too," Reva agreed softly. They sat in comfortable silence, the way they had countless times over the decades. Grant thought about his life, about the journey that had led him from a lonely young man to the patriarch of this wonderful, complicated, beautiful family. He thought about the scared, wounded woman he had found in his barn and how she had transformed into this strong, incredible person beside him. He thought about all the love they had shared, all the challenges they had overcome, all the joy they had created together. "Reva," Grant said quietly. "Yes, my love. If I could go back and live my life again, I would not change a single thing. Every moment with you has been a gift." Reva leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Every moment with you has been my greatest joy." Grant Kendrick passed away peacefully in his sleep that night, at the age of 76, with Reva sleeping beside him. When she woke the next morning and found him gone, she held him and cried, mourning the loss of her greatest love while also being grateful that he had gone peacefully, without pain. The funeral was large, attended by people from all over the territory. White ranchers and Apache villagers came together to honor a man who had bridged worlds and built bridges between communities. His children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren all shared memories of a man who had been unfailingly kind, endlessly patient, and deeply loving. Reva stood strong through it all, supported by her family. They buried Grant on a hill overlooking the ranch, in a spot where he could see the barn where their story had begun and the house where they had built their life together. After the funeral, Reva's children wanted her to move in with one of them, worried about her living alone. But Reva refused. "This is my home," she said firmly. "This is where Grant and I built our life. This is where I want to stay." She continued to live on the ranch, still contributing to its operation, though her children took over the heavy work. Every morning, she would take her coffee out to the porch and sit in Grant's chair, looking out over the land they had nurtured together. Every evening, she would sit by the fire and remember all the conversations they had shared there. Reva lived for 7 more years after Grant's death, years filled with family and purpose. She watched her great-grandchildren grow, passed down Apache traditions and stories, and kept Grant's memory alive through tales of their life together. She helped mediate disputes between communities, drawing on decades of experience in building bridges between cultures. On a late September evening, 46 years to the day after Grant had first found her in his barn, Reva sat on the porch watching the sunset. Samuel was visiting, and he came to sit beside her, worried about how tired she looked. "Are you all right, Mother?" he asked. Reva smiled at him, her face peaceful. "I am thinking about your father, about the life we built. I am thinking that I am ready to see him again." "Mother," Samuel said, concern in his voice. "Do not worry," Reva said, patting his hand. "I am not afraid. I have lived a good life, a full life. I am 83 years old. I have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who will carry on what Grant and I started. I am content." That night, Reva passed away in her sleep, in the same bed where she had recovered from her wounds all those years ago, where she had given birth to her children, where she had slept beside Grant for over 40 years. Her family found her the next morning, peaceful and still, finally reunited with the man she had loved. They buried Reva beside Grant on the hill overlooking the ranch. The funeral was as well attended as his had been, a testament to the impact both of them had on the community. As they laid her to rest, Samuel spoke about his parents' love story, about how they had overcome impossible odds to build a life together. "My parents taught us that love is stronger than hate," Samuel said, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. "That understanding can overcome fear. That families are built through loyalty and love, not just blood. Their legacy lives on in all of us who knew them, who learned from them, who were loved by them. We will honor their memory by continuing to build bridges, by choosing love over hate, by being brave enough to do what is right even when it is hard." The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel and Rose's management, eventually passing to the next generation, and then the next. The hill where Grant and Reva were buried became a family gathering place, where descendants would come to remember the couple who had started it all. The barn where Grant had first found Reva was maintained and preserved, a reminder of where their story began. The house they had shared was expanded and updated, but never lost its essential character as a place of warmth and welcome. And their story was told and retold, passed down through the generations as an example of what was possible when people chose love over fear, understanding over hatred, and hope over despair. The love between a white rancher and an Apache woman, born in blood and fear on a September night in 1876, had created a legacy that would last for generations, changing not just one family but an entire community. In the end, Grant and Reva's greatest legacy was not the successful ranch or the prosperous family, though both were significant. Their greatest legacy was the proof that love could overcome any obstacle, that families could be built across any divide, and that two people who chose each other, who fought for each other, who built a life together despite everything working against them, could create something beautiful and lasting that would echo through time. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a life well lived, and a love that would never die as long as there were people to remember it and honor it. Together in life and together in death, Grant Kendrick and Reva Pacheco had proved that the most powerful force in the world is not hate or fear, but the transformative power of love freely given and gratefully received.